A knight began to put on his boots, and then he grabbed his sword. It was none other than Brian. His eyes were shining with determination, and he was more than ready. Someone asked him where he was going. He turned back and with a serious expression replied that he didn't know. They had only told him to get ready, so he had done so. Emily, who was behind him, started observing in silence. Nana placed her hands over her chest and with a sad expression asked if once again she wouldn't see him for a long time. Just before Brian could respond, someone wearing black boots began walking toward them and answered that this time they wouldn't take long. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention shifted to one side. It was Cyan. With a calm gaze, he asked Nana not to worry and with a smile asked if Brian was ready. Cyan began to walk towards them. Brian turned around and replied that he was ready. He had followed his instructions and had prepared himself, but he was somewhat confused since he did not know where they were going. Cyan began to show the ring, which was emitting an intense red mist, revealing that they were going to go to the Valley of Lemia. Upon hearing this, their eyes widened with surprise and confusion. With a surprised expression, Emily asked if that wasn't the place they had gone to before, mentioning that it was very far away. Brian was speechless. Using the power of the ring, Cyan opened a portal, turned to them, and with a serene expression revealed that by using the portal, they would arrive immediately, asking Brian to hurry up. Deep down he knew they needed to rush. The portal appeared and Cyan began to enter. Brian started following him. The reality was that today was the day his sister Alice was going to die. Mounted on horses, the Knights of the Light arrived at the battlefront. A man with a beard opened his mouth and gave the order to all the troops to stop. He was the captain of the squadron. He turned around and with a smile thanked Alice for coming here with them. Behind him were Alice and Cecilia mounted on horses. With a forced smile she asked Sir Yulkin not to call her miss. In front of them were more troops of the Knights of the Light. Once they advanced a little, her attention fixed on them. Sir Yulkin turned toward her and mentioned that it was truly admirable that she had come as a Knight of the Light. With a forced smile and a confused expression, she asked Yulkin not to praise her so much since she still had a lot to learn. Yulkin had a scar on his eye. His attention was fixed on her because he was sure that she was going to do very well, and the Duke would also be proud of her. Yulkin got off the horse. Alice did too and became somewhat nervous, asking him to stop calling her miss. He started laughing and mentioned that the Duke was waiting for her. After walking for a while, she reached the Duke and brought her feet together as a sign of respect. Her father was contemplating the battlefield. She approached him and with a serious voice introduced herself as the eldest daughter of the Vert family, Alice Vert. She placed her hand over her chest and explained that she had come as quickly as possible after receiving her father's message. Instead of being happy to see his daughter, the father showed no emotion. With a cold expression, he revealed that today the visit of the third and fourth princes, as well as the second princess, would take place, asking her to prepare. Alice's eyes filled with joy. With a cheerful smile, she replied yes. Her father was still the same, so distant it was hard to believe they were family. The Duke turned around, and with a serious gaze revealed that the princes and the princess had arrived. Upon hearing this, Alice was filled with curiosity and turned around. Once they turned around, they saw a group of knights and several carriages. The atmosphere grew tense. The third prince, Pavane Severus, got out of the carriage, began observing the surroundings, and mentioned that this smell was unpleasant. The fourth prince, Neravane Severus, also got out of the carriage, placed his hand over his nose, and couldn't help but wonder how they could live in such a dirty place. With a kind smile, the second princess, Violet Sverus, got off the carriage, explaining that the Vert were always working hard on the front lines. Once the princes and princess approached, the Duke, Alice, and the Knights of Light bowed before them as a sign of respect. The Duke Vilayarth Vert responded that it was an honor for him to meet them. Somewhat annoyed, Nerovian opened the carriage door and got back in. With an expression full of hatred, he decided to take care of this as soon as possible and leave this place since these visits were merely formalities anyway. Pavian began to stare at the Duke, clenched his teeth, and with a furious gaze asked if there were not going to be attacks from the magical beasts. With a confident smile, the Duke explained that even in the rear guard, the magical beasts they could encounter were small. At that moment, someone began to walk toward them. The Duke turned around and with a determined smile mentioned that there was nothing to worry about since they had the best knight produced by the Vert family. Ashel Vert appeared. His eyes were full of tranquility. It had been some time since he had seen his father. Alice's eyes filled with curiosity and confusion upon seeing Ashel. The Duke approached his son, placed a hand on his shoulder, and with a proud smile decided to trust that he would fulfill his mission with excellence. Ashel began to look his father in the eyes and promised not to disappoint him. Pavion's attention fixed on him. With a furious expression, he gave Ashel the order to take care of the beasts before they got closer, as they were far too valuable people unlike them. The princess's gaze fixed on Ashel. With a smile, she mentioned that she trusted him for their future safety. Ashel began to gaze at the ground in silence, his eyes filled with happiness. For him it was an honor to serve the princess. She turned around, started observing the others, and asked why Luniel had not come with them if he was always with them. For her it was strange, since he usually did not miss this type of formal event. Ashel began to stare at her with a penetrating gaze, and then, with a serene smile, mentioned that an unexpected commitment had arisen, so Luniel had entrusted him with the task of escorting her younger siblings. Upon hearing this, the princess couldn't help but feel suspicious and confused, but even so, she said that having Count Ashel as an escort was reassuring for her. They got into the carriage, and the Knights of Light began to look down at the ground, creating tension in the atmosphere. While Ashel was staring intently at the carriage, Alice's attention fixed on her brother. She began observing him with a suspicious expression. She remembered that he always escorted the first prince. She didn't know why her brother had decided to come to the front to escort the twin princes and the princess. With a curious gaze, she couldn't help but wonder if this was just a coincidence. Just then, Ashel turned toward her and explained that he had heard she had joined the Knight's Order as the top of her class. Hearing his voice snapped her out of her trance. Ashel started staring at her with a look full of hatred and congratulated her. Alice's eyes widened in surprise, as this was a familiar look. When she was 9 years old, on her birthday, Ashel came to her room, started stroking her head and congratulated her. Little Alice was holding a scroll in her hands and was happy. Her attention was fixed on the magical scroll that her brother had given her. Her eyes widened with surprise and curiosity, not knowing what it was for. It was a level 4 magic scroll that at that moment she could not use, as a reminder that by growing stronger and reaching level 4 magical power, she would be able to use it someday. Over time, when she obtained a level 4 magical power, she was sitting in her room reading some books and remembered the magic scroll that her brother had given her. She opened the scroll, placed her hand on top of it, and activated it, making a magic circle appear. But just then, someone appeared and grabbed her hand. It was Cecilia. She firmly grabbed Alice's hand, pulling her hand away from the scroll, her eyes filled with confusion, asking what she was doing. Cecilia panicked and revealed that it was a medium-level magical beast summoning scroll, and if she activated it, something serious could happen. Upon hearing this, she couldn't help but go on alert. She began to observe the scroll with a surprised look and couldn't help but start sweating. If she had used that scroll, she could have died. Back in the present, Ashel turned his back on her and started walking toward the carriages. Alice's attention was fixed on him. Her mind was full of curiosity, since she didn't know if her brother knew about it when he had given her the scroll. Ashel's body was surrounded by a strange energy. Alice didn't know why he had done this or what on earth was happening. The carriage set off, and the Knights of Light began to walk behind it and escort it. Inside the carriage were the princes. Barovian was upset and, with an angry gaze, asked if Brother Luniel had really assigned Ashel to be their escort. Pavian crossed his arms and remained silent. He placed his hand under his chin and started looking down. For him it was suspicious, and he didn't know if they were plotting something. In front of them sat the princess. With a serious expression, she revealed that assigning someone as skilled as Ashel to protect them was already a reasonable suspicion. The twins began observing their sister in silence, knowing that she was right. The princess's eyes began to shine. She asked if they didn't know what kind of person Luniel was, telling them to prepare themselves if they didn't want to die. Just then, the ground started shaking, leaving the twins somewhat confused and worried. Barovian turned to one side and asked what was happening. Alice started running towards them, panicked, and revealed that they were being attacked. Her eyes widened with seriousness, asking them to evacuate immediately. A powerful giant beast called Atarak, a supreme-level magical beast, appeared and began roaring. The knights couldn't help but step back and feel fear. The presence of the monster created pressure. Narovian placed his hand on the carriage window, clenched his teeth tightly, and couldn't help but feel terror. Pavian started looking at Alice and couldn't help but fall into confusion. The beast placed its hands on the ground and began to roar loudly. Pavian started watching the beast through the window, and his eyes filled with panic as he realized that this was a terrestrial dragon. They had said that supreme-level magical beasts would not appear. The beast struck the ground forcefully, causing the knights' bodies to be flung away. The princes and princess panicked. Alice opened the carriage door and in a calm voice gave them the order to evacuate immediately. They began to get out of the carriage, and at that moment, the beast's tail was already upon them. But just then, Alice activated a protection shield and blocked the fierce attack, saving their lives. While she was blocking the attack, she started staring intently at the beast and gave them the order to keep moving forward. For her, this made no sense since there was no way magical beasts could appear in the rear. Consumed by fear, Nerovian turned his back on everyone and started running like crazy. Seeing this, Pavian was somewhat confused and asked his cowardly brother to stop running. Little by little the shield was breaking, and the princess was lying on the ground. Someone caught their attention, making her turn around. Her eyes widened in fear upon seeing who had appeared. It was Ashel. He began to unsheath the sword and walk towards them. His eyes were full of evil. He promised to protect her if she came to his side. Obviously, the princess got angry and clenched her teeth, knowing that this bastard had been waiting for this moment and was planning to kill her amidst this chaos. Alice was somewhat surprised to see Ashel's behavior. She felt suspicious and knew something wasn't right. Someone used the Wind Blossom skill and attacked the beast with powerful gusts of wind, making it move its tail away from Alice's shield. She turned to one side and saw Cecilia. She was happy to see that her friend was helping her. Cecilia, who had launched the attack, asked her to come to her side. Just then, Alice grabbed the princess's arm, asking for forgiveness. The princess stood up, and Alice and she began moving towards Cecilia. With a confused gaze, she asked where they were going. Alice remained silent. Cecilia responded that the first thing was to get out of this place. Alice turned around, and her mind filled with confusion as she knew this was not right. She had been able to feel a murderous intent in her brother's gaze toward Princess Violet. Her expression changed, causing her to panic. Behind them stood Ashel. The monster raised its claw and prepared to attack. Her brother remained still, and seeing this, she asked him to be careful. The monster attacked, but Ashel stayed motionless, staring at his sister with hatred. Just before the attack could land, he blocked it effortlessly using a golden magical barrier. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.